Mr Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for the copy of his statement and his call last night. 4 weeks on from the horror of the 7th of October, it is hard to comprehend the scale of the devastation in Gaza. Almost 1.5 million people displaced, more than 10,000 people killed, with more trapped under the rubble of destroyed buildings. Every single one of those lives matters. Every single death is a devastating tragedy. And with 2/3 of those dead, women and children, these civilian deaths are not just shocking, they cannot be ignored. Hundreds of thousands of people are crowded into shelters in desperate need of food, water, medicine and fuel. And while we welcome too the 93 trucks that entered through Rafah on the 6th of November, this is completely insufficient to meet the scale of humanitarian need. I was surprised the Minister didn't make more mention of fuel, because this is the urgent priority. Without it, the water cannot flow, the hospitals can't power their incubators, and the food cannot be cooked. The sewage system breakdown is now threatening a major public health crisis. For weeks, the international community has demanded that the siege conditions on Gaza be lifted, but it has still not happened. This is totally unacceptable, and it cannot continue. Both the UN Humanitarian Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, and the United States have made serious efforts to break this deadlock, to provide assurances that Israel needs about fuel diversion. Can he tell the House what efforts the government is making to insist that fuel for humanitarian purposes can get into Gaza? I welcome his update on discussions about Kerem Shalom. But what's his assessment of the speed at which this can be achieved? And can I also urge him again to follow the US example and appoint a humanitarian coordinator to scale up the passage of aid? We all recognise that while rockets and bombs continue to fall, it's impossible to deliver the scale of aid that's needed across the whole of Gaza and to repair the damage, extensive as it is, to water and electricity systems. We all want an end to the violence and the urgent release of hostages. But with Hamas leaders doubling down on their determination to attack Israel, and with Israel ruling out a ceasefire until hostages are released, the reality is that humanitarian pauses are, as Martin Griffiths wrote movingly last week, the only viable prospect. In Cairo last week, ministers and aid agencies impressed on me the urgency of this. Pauses provide not only much needed aid, but space. Space for the basic humanity to bury the dead, space to look past the pain, and space for the dialogue to make progress towards peace more likely. This is needed now, no more delay. Mr Deputy Speaker, we're devastated by the deaths of so many aid workers and UNRWA staff. The highest number of UN aid workers killed in any conflict in the history of the United Nations. And I hope I can join the whole House in mourning their loss and paying tribute to their bravery and their humanity. Safe shelters, safe distribution centres, safe medical facilities, hospitals and emergency service convoys are essential. And I echo his words about the unacceptable nature of settler violence in the West Bank. But will the Minister join with me in reiterating our calls that Israel's clear right to self-defence is not a blank cheque? He's acknowledged himself the importance of international law. Has he raised the protection of hospitals and schools and refugee camps with his Israeli counterparts, and the need for action to be in accordance with international law to protect civilians and ensure safe, unimpeded access for aid? Mr Deputy Speaker, the average age in Gaza is just 18. Make no mistake, this is a children's war. More children have died in Gaza in 4 weeks than in all of the world's conflicts in each of the last 3 years. There are 1 million children caught up in the devastation who are orphaned and displaced, sleeping outside as the weather grows colder, short of food and forced to drink dirty water. In most conflicts, we would expect children to be evacuated to a safer place to receive care and shelter. What makes this so devastating is that almost uniquely in this conflict, that is not going to happen. And in the face of such an extraordinary threat to children, the international community is obligated to do more. With the Foreign Secretary at the G7 this week, will the government join us in calling for an emergency plan to support the children of Gaza, to prioritise aid to children, safe and protected shelters for food, clean water and medical care as winter sets in? Because this crisis didn't start in Gaza on the 7th of October. Even before then, 2/3 of children were suffering from trauma. But one aid agency that operates in North Sinai and Gaza told me last week that this now stands at 100%. Without a long-term coordinated plan for the children of Gaza, the political solution we need will not be realised and the cycle of violence will not be broken. We can and we must do more.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady very much for her comments and also for the priorities which she has set out in her response. Can I echo her comment about the brave humanitarian workers who have lost their lives? She will remember that we have consistently condemned that in the case of Sudan, and where something like 20 have lost their lives, there are more than 100 humanitarian workers who have lost their lives. Unarmed people putting themselves in harm's way deliberately to help their fellow citizens, and we honour them across the House as she has. Can I also pay tribute to those who are working in the crisis centre in Whitehall? 100 officials or so, nearly all of them volunteers, very young, working triple shifts the night that Rafah opened, working through the night to help British citizens. I pay tribute to them, their spirit and their hard work. She made a particular point about the importance of fuel, and of course she is absolutely right. We are negotiating for it. She will know that Hamas have a lot of fuel in their tunnels, so the fuel could be made available, but we recognise entirely what that fuel is being used for to help in humanitarian purposes, and we are doing our best to negotiate for it. And she will also have seen the G7 statement today, which is very clear on these points. She asks about routes for access, and the American envoy, Mr. Satterfield, has been working non-stop on this to try and work out whether there are other routes using Kerem Shalom and Rafah to speed up, and we will continue to do all of that. She prioritises the importance of pauses, and we completely agree, and we are arguing for humanitarian pauses. But she will also accept that the method within the pause by which you distribute humanitarian support, it's extremely important that we do not make the mistakes we made in Srebrenica, in Rwanda, in northern Iraq, of bringing vulnerable people together and not being able to protect them. So there are very clear guidelines on any pauses and safe spaces that there must be absolute protection for those who go there. She mentioned that support for Israel is not a blank cheque. Of course she is right about that. Good friends deliver hard messages, and they're able to do so precisely because they are good friends. And she talks of children. I saw UNICEF this morning. I recognise entirely the passion with which she raised that point, and we will do everything we can to ensure that the priority of children is recognised in all the humanitarian work that we do. Finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I remind the House of the wise words of our former colleague and former Foreign Secretary, the noble Lord Haig, at the end of his brilliant article in the Times on October the 9th, where he said, "It is no consolation to those caught up in it that this is no strategic masterstroke by Hamas, more a desperate move to fend off a future that is rapidly leaving them behind. We should not forget that the day after this, there will be an urgent need for a political context."